forever on out. And Nick Wright, who is someone I'm a fan of, although I've given him shit on Twitter, probably so impolitely that if he or anybody on the show saw it, they wouldn't think it was cool at all. He taunts fan bases. He has a real hard on for taunting the Bills. And what's interesting is I don't think he needs to perform this troll act to be engaging. He's a really engaging, fun broadcaster who takes on this kind of shitty dick. This like, he just is just the dick to people and that's part of his shtick. This monologue of his nearly brought me to tears. He was there, the whole crew, the whole First Things First crew, Nick Wright, Chris Broussard, my favorite broadcaster, by the way, Chris Broussard, Kevin Wildes, they were all there when it happened. They were covering it. And I got to say, man, I do feel bad for him and everybody else. Like, just you're there to celebrate something, a shared moment of joy, and it devolves into this. But I have a lot of thoughts on how this is being reacted to.
So we'll play some of the monologue.
So I'm gonna tell you guys about the times my family first saw me cry, because there's a chance you guys are gonna see me cry for the first time. For Diora, my older daughter, it was December of 2012 in the lobby of her school when she was 7 years old, when I went to pick her up the day of Sandy Hook. And that day, of course, someone with a lightweight semi-automatic rifle shot around 24 kids her age, and I saw her in that lobby, and I immediately started sobbing. It's the first time she ever saw me cry. My youngest daughter, Deanna, who's been on this show, who everyone here knows really well, first time she ever saw me cry was March of 2022 in our kitchen, when I opened up Twitter and saw what had happened at Robb Elementary. And someone with a lightweight semi-automatic rifle shot around 24 people that were her age. And I sobbed. And she was concerned. She didn't know. I just, like, it was so, and I'm not a big crier, nothing against it, but I sobbed. And yesterday, shortly after, a few kids themselves with lightweight semi-automatic rifles shot around 24 people. My wife saw me cry in a way I haven't. And it wasn't when at the parade. It wasn't on the walk over. It was at the hotel. Once we had gotten to the safety of our room, we're at the elevator. And there was this little old lady who was on the phone fighting back tears, wearing a Chiefs shirt. And she saw me and knew us, knew the show, and came over and gave me a hug and started crying. And I still didn't cry yet. And then we talked. And she said she was there with her kids and grandkids. And her, I believe she said, 14-year-old granddaughter had to take the lead because she's been trained for this. And the adults hadn't. And I cried. And I cried because it's so god-dog cruel what we've taken from this generation of kids that we all got. Listen, yesterday, Wildes is right, we're lucky, but yesterday was also the single worst 10 seconds of my life. And it was not when we heard the gunshot and we're told to get down, and it was not the part that is seared into my memory from a selfish perspective is the time between them telling us active shooter and me finding in the crowd ostensibly where the shooter was, my wife, my sister-in-law, and her best friend. Because that 10 seconds felt like it was 5 minutes. But that is such a different feeling than for these young kids who have now had to learn, drill, and experience what to do in a mass shooting situation before they lose their first tooth.
Yeah.
Before they have their first kiss. For those kids there yesterday, part of their childhood ended. And to your point, those are the kids that we consider lucky, the kids who didn't end up in hospital beds. And so I'm incredibly sad about this. And this is where I will pivot a bit. But I am furious. I'm furious because this is so clearly all our fault. And we have so clearly lost the plot so quickly. I understand now that at this point, talking about any type of regulations whatsoever on guns in America is verboten for some. But some of the strictest statewide gun regulations ever passed in this country were passed by Ronald Reagan.
Right.
And the assault weapons ban in the 90s was supported by Ronald Reagan, who is a paragon, you know what I mean, for many on the conservative side of the aisle. We say when it comes to this particular topic, we turn ourselves into morons. We say ludicrous things like, why have laws? People break them. Like we make these arguments of, well, if you pass a law, only criminals will break the law. As if, okay, well then make selling meth legal because only meth dealers will break it. We trick ourselves into good guy with a gun. There were 800 good guys there yesterday. How many of them did we shake hands with before that we saw? There were uniformed police. You couldn't have had more good guys prepared, ready. And in an instant, there's nothing they can do until after the fact and mitigate the damage. And that's my home city. And the only thing that brings Kansas City together is the Chiefs. We are a divided city. We are a segregated city. The Chiefs is the only thing that brings it together. And the moment is shattered. And the state of Missouri, as of October, was fighting at the Supreme Court to not allow local police to enforce federal gun laws. They were fighting against the local cops' ability to enforce federal gun laws. That's how insane we've gone. And what we will do is to just keep plowing ahead. We will continue with the wellness checks that my best friend in the world called me yesterday to check on me, just like I did for him 2 years ago when he was at a parade in Highland Park, Chicago, that got shot up on the 4th of July. And we'll just keep going with active shooter drills and a generation of kids who had this part of their life stolen from them, and throw our hands up and say, what can we do when we all know the answer? And so I
You mind if I ask a question first?
Not at all. This is your show, dude. No, not at all.
What's the answer?
Well, if you'll allow me, I think what's the question? Is Nick Wright and so much of the sports media industrial complex asking the right questions here? Full disclosure, I've come around on guns. I'm now essentially pro-gun, where I wasn't before, where I was much more vehemently on the side of gun regulations and could not understand the pro-gun position and could not fathom why this conversation was so irreconcilable. You always come to such an impasse. However, I am for sensible regulations. I don't quite understand the absolutist Second Amendment position. So I agree with Nick Wright's point that people do start saying incoherent things because we have regulation in every other facet of our lives. Here's the thing, though. So I saw responses like this. Jamel Hill, Mina Kimes, Joy Taylor tweeted similar kinds of things. This is being called a mass shooting, and I think we have to be more precise in our language. This is not a case of someone going into a crowd specifically with the intention of killing people So it's not like those school shootings. I agree with Nick. I'm a parent, and I gotta fucking tell you, every day that I drop my daughter off at school, this is in the back of my mind. That something horrible like that could happen. And I'm getting around to what I think. I think there's a way. I'm not going to say I have the answer, but I have a suggestion that could be a way forward. But in this case, this is kids, by the way, whose faces have not been shown, because in a lot of the footage of the people tackling one of the shooters, they blocked his face out. Why? Because he's not white. He's black. Did those kids obtain those guns legally through relaxed gun regulations in the state of Missouri? Probably not. Those kids have illegal guns, right? So that's one thing. They were just, they were being, somebody called into Chris Broussard's radio show with Rob Parker, somebody who said that they were very close and saw that these kids were starting shit with grownups. Then they got into it with each other. And this eyewitness said they were just shooting blind. He said he wouldn't have been surprised if some of them shot some of their own friends. So framing this as a gun control issue, when this is appears to be the quintessential case of people who got guns, and I don't know this for a fact, but I'm guessing they didn't get those guns from their parents who legally obtained them. That's misleading, or it's misguided. What do you think of that? And I can continue, but I'm just curious to get your take so far.
It gets close to my biggest gripe and why I was dreading having this conversation, especially in the guise of sports media. I have to even back up a little bit further to get to my point. I'll bring him back up on the screen. This man, Nick Wright, is a clown. He is. He is a clown. He's an absolute total clown. He is a troll and an ass. He does it for good reason. He does it because it gets him attention. He does it because it gets him in the front of minds and in the back of minds of fan bases like my own. I'm a giant Bills fan, and he trolls the Bills as well all the time. It's not just in a really. Let me finish here.
Oh, sorry.
It's not just because he trolls the Bills that I call him a clown. I call him a clown because that's how he portrays himself. He portrays himself as this paragon of knowledge, that this know-it-all. It's a whole shtick that all these guys use all the time. Here's the problem with them tackling an issue like this. This is not an issue that fits within the paint by numbers circumstance. All this guy does, and the people who are on these shows, like Stephen A., like Dan Le Batard, even my boys, Tony Kornheiser and Mike Wilbon, I love them. But here's what they do. They paint by numbers daily. Guns and gun control and violence are not issues that can be addressed by painting by numbers. So I feel for him. I feel for his family. I feel for that fan in the Chiefs uniform, even as a Bills fan who was burned by them. I feel for them. It sucks. I would hate for that to happen. You know, I want them to lose, not to die. I get that. It's not something that I want to happen. But what's clear to me is that he doesn't have the chops nor the depth to handle an issue like this.
Or the will to do to do the homework.
Not just will, but he's playing a role, as I've told you repeatedly. And that role will not allow him to address deeper, more substantive issues. It's more about arguing whether LeBron James is the GOAT, whether Pat Mahomes is already better than Tom Brady, and what coach should be fired. He can't handle this.
No.
This ain't him.
And he would have been one of those people at the Super Bowl party I went to who similarly can't veer off the I don't want to call it ideological, but the track of exposure, the things they've been exposed to enough to even be able to receive dialogue on the issue that again does not paint by numbers. The reason I interrupted you is because I was going to ask you, and I think I know the answer, but does his mean-spiritedness towards fan bases bother you?
A little, but that's not my big gripe.
Right.
Because like a guy like Jim Rome has been mean-spirited forever. There's been plenty of guys who've been mean-spirited. And I realize, especially as a broadcaster, you are playing a role. You are trying to drive people to listen to you, to watch you, to engage with you. I'm playing a role even right now. I'm a bit elevated, not crazy high, but I'm an elevated version of myself. It's part of the job. So the mean-spirited thing doesn't bug me. What bugs me is the know-it-all nature of the people on these programs, whether it is Shannon Sharp or Mad Dog Russo, who just got his extension. Stephen A. Screaming A is more appropriate. Skip Bayless, all these folks, the know-it-all nature about things they can't possibly know it all, that's what bugs me. Not just about them, but about everything.
And you said something I want to laser in on. The know-it-all nature about things they can't know at all is how I heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah.